first thing we always do with the podcast, before we talk about Slash, before we talk about Clapton, before we talk about my favourite band, Rival Sons, and all of the amazing images that you've taken, the first thing we always do is to just find out why it is that you picked up a camera in the first place. So why do you now find yourself in the position of being a photographer?
That's a good question. That's a good question, Kris. Yeah. When I was 17 years old, I learned to play the guitar. Started learning to play the guitar, and my eventual aim was to become a rock star. And so I went to art college to form a band, because that's what you do. That's what Jimmy Page did, you know. So I did. I went to art college in Birmingham, and I kind of, you know, I was learning guitar, but also I bought myself a little Pentax P30. Little film camera, and I'd be, you know, often seen around campus. You're just clicking away, and I think for me, there's kind of, I mean, there's a synergy between music and art, which I find fascinating. There's a magic to it, but so I did get in a band, and we got signed, and we put records out for about 10 or 15 years. That's what I did, but when that all kind of ended because our record label went under, I kind of drifted back into photography, but specifically music photography. And that's why I think failed rock stars make the best music photographers.
Well, I've got to assume then, if you're out there performing as a musician, that's lent itself quite nicely for you when it comes to predicting what people are going to do on stage, because obviously that's usually a bit of a chaotic scene, and you've got some wonderful live images. So I'm assuming you've managed to use some of your on-stage experience as a way of predicting the unpredictable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's, you know, it is fascinating, but having done it, you kind of know that, you know, a guitar player or bass player or whoever musician will have a couple of stock moves. And if you see them do it once, if you just keep on them, they'll do it again. They will. Because, you know, and it's all, I think with music photography, it's all about that those shapes, those kind of Pete Townsend windmills, and those kind of, you know, Jay from Rival Sons, you know, he will always hold the microphone aloft like the little lion cub at the beginning of the Lion King. He'll do it every time. You just got to wait.
So overall, though, I mean, like, obviously talking off stage, musicians are creative people. I think you have to have a certain amount of self-belief to be someone on stage. Maybe that's misinterpreted as arrogance at times, but you have to have a certain amount of self-belief to be someone on stage performing to people. What are they like as subjects for photos away from performance? Like when you've got them backstage, or, you know, just away from them performing as a musician, what are they like to photograph? In a sense of, like, musicians on stage, they have a purpose. They're there to play music, and you're almost candidly capturing them doing what they do. And sometimes they might play up to you, but they're still doing something else. But when it's just you and them, and they are performing essentially for the camera, or they are just posing for the camera, what are they like as subjects? Are they hard to work with, easy to work with?
Well, I think there's like a gazillion different types of offstage musician. I mean, most musicians don't get into music to be photographed, to be, you know, it's all about the music, and I respect that. But some of them are peacocks. Some of them can be a little bit arrogant. But on the whole, you know, they're just human beings. So, you know, you just have to kind of approach each of these commissions or sessions as a bit of sometimes they can be a bit of a chess game. You have to, I mean, quite often I will have a chat first, you know, especially if it's the first time photographing someone. You just kind of, I'll keep the camera in the bag, and we'll just talk about music for a bit, or we'll talk about bathroom taps, or whatever that you want to talk about. And because you can kind of gauge it pretty quickly whether that someone's going to be one of those just instantly striking an epic pose, or somebody who's a little bit more withdrawn, who's going to have to be kind of coached through it a little bit. It's interesting. It is interesting. It is a little bit like a game of chess. You kind of, especially a lot of the jobs I do will be on a kind of press circuit. So, you know, a band will come into the UK, London. Well, this is before the COVID stuff. But I mean, I'd be brought in to normally I'll do a couple of backstage photographs, where I'll pop up a studio, a little kind of drape with some lights. And you get very, very quick. You don't get very long to do those. So you have to be really, really quick. So you have to play your chess game real quick. So, stand there, do this. I think, they like, I think I'm waffling. I'm waffling on.
No, I like it.
But I think it's always a bit of a game of chess. And sometimes it's a simple game of chess, which can be literally you just like shaking hands and you've got a rapport instantly. Sometimes you have to do a bit of a chat about music or about a lot of musicians before they go on stage have rituals, and I know that those moments are precious because having been there, you don't get very long. You come, you get off the bus, you go straight into the venue. There's a load in, you have to sound check, and then you get a small window where you can eat, you do your press, and you get ready. And so I think you have to work fast. Anyway, that's what I think.
Well, do you feel like, obviously you're mentioning that you have this experience, so you know the position that they're being put in. Do you think that gives you advantage over other photographers that haven't been through that same route, that have just been photographers their whole life and want to photograph the personalities? They can get maybe they can get carried away with thinking that their part is more important than what it is. And because you can empathize with the position the musician's in, that puts you in an advantageous position.
Maybe not. It informs the process, definitely. I know that the guy, will be looking at his watch after if you don't get the shot in 5 minutes. And I appreciate that my part in this is to document and not necessarily make art every time. A lot of photographers will book a studio and have a 4-hour session with a person, and you get all that time, and you've got an assistant, and you've got all that time to kind of hone the lighting, check. You've got stylists, hair people. A lot of the time, I will be doing the styling. I've got some really basic makeup in my bag. Sometimes, quite often, I've got a black Levi's denim jacket, which has been on more musicians than I don't know. It's just like. Because that's the thing, you have got such a small window to A, get a rapport, B, get the shots, and C, get out of there. And that's it. Bands love it if you're quick. In, out, put the kettle on. I know that because I've got out of a van and you've got 20 minutes to do all the things. So they'll just be looking, where's the food?
But from your side of things, does that pressure feed into your personality nicely? Do you enjoy that pressure, or do you feel like you'd like to have longer?
Oh, I always want longer, and I always beat myself up afterwards because I always think, I should have done that, or I've got a particular. I suffer a little bit from anxiety, and it's very similar to stage fright I used to get before a big gig. So if I've got a big shoot, what I'll do on the train up, I've got a little A5 sketch pad, and I'll sketch the entire shoot so that when the artist, the PR will say, hey, this is blah, 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 and we'll meet. And I'll say, right, I'll get my book out and I'll say, the camera stays in the bag. We might chat about music for, a couple of minutes, and then I'll get my book out and I'll go, here are my ideas. You're going to stand like that, look like that, and do this. And most of the time that works really, really well. Yeah.
And on the occasions that it doesn't, how do you sort of mediate that?
Well, you just, at the end of the day, I've got to get the shot, because if I don't get the shot, you don't get any more commissions. It's simple as that. There's a kind of old school lead guitar player. He's in his late 60s, early 70s, and I had a commission to shoot him about 4 or 5 years ago, and I turned up at the location, and it wasn't particularly conducive to a shoot. We were supposed to be doing some. The idea was to get him in situ in a room, so I couldn't do my usual kind of pop up a studio, some lights, and the light was beautiful outside, but he didn't want to go outside because it was cold. So it was a bit of a challenge, and so we just literally talked about fuzz pedals for about 15 minutes, and then he started laughing, and then we went outside. So I mean, I knew I knew the shot was outside. He didn't want to go outside. I did. And you just, and so you just have to kind of, it's like tickling a trout or something, you know. But weirdly, ever since that, he's always asked for me. So for, you know, that was, I think, I can't remember what the original commission was for. It was a magazine, I think. But now he actually comes to me for his label stuff because he knows, like, you know, it's quick, you know, and he knows that, you know, we'll talk about fuzz pedals for 15 minutes and then, you know, he'll be back in his car in half an hour. So
to look at some of the names that you photographed and not just specifically the names, but from my own, not just childhood, but my own adolescence and then my 20s. I remember going to see Clapton at the Albert Hall on my birthday. That was a bit of a life-changing thing for me. I'd been a fan for years. I missed out on going to the Cream reunion, which really upset me. And to see Clapton was pretty fantastic. And on my birthday, I've had to see, and I say had to see this, there is an explanation coming. I've had to see Slash on several occasions. He actually plays quite an important role in my life. I had a heart attack when I was 19 and Whoa. I missed the last London gig for Velvet Revolver before they split up. So I was very upset about that. My wife's a huge stalker of Miles Kennedy, who now performs with Slash. So I've had to see him on many occasions. When you get these names like Slash, Miles Kennedy, I mean, for me, Rival Sons, but Billy Gibbons, Lizzie Hale, you know, Robin Trower is another one. Is there any sense of intimidation or a sort of maybe even just excitement to meet these people who are such big names in what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, totally. I mean, it shits me up sometimes, you know. I mean, it's when my friend James phoned me up and said, "Hey, Rob, do you fancy shooting Slash?" It was like, yeah, of course, you know. But then you get off the phone, and then there's a realization that you're about to shoot a portrait of someone who's been photographed a million times, who you know, he won't take any crap, and it's not his first rodeo, so he will know. and he would get, and he actually, you know, he would get to look and approve these shots before they see the light of day. Yeah, of course, it's you know, there's a lot of What I tend to do is plan, and then just remember they're humans, because that's all these people are. I mean, as charismatic and successful and iconic as these people are, they are human beings. Some of them, they'll be having bad days or good days. That, you know, so especially if they're on the press circuit, you know, it can be a bit of a grind. Yeah, it's just I just plan, and try and forget just view them as humans and shoot them accordingly, and do your research and plan. And that's it. But yeah.
2020's been like the year to prove that pretty much nothing goes to plan sometimes, you know. It can all fall apart. And I work in wedding photography, which usually makes people grimace. And when things go wrong with that, you have to be able to think on your feet pretty quickly. And inevitably things do go wrong because there's lots of people all trying to kind of steer the ship at the same time. With live music, there's obviously the potential for lots of things to go wrong for the band themselves. But what are the potential issues that you have as a photographer photographing a live band?
It's just always lighting at the end of the day. I mean, because most of my work, I'd say probably about 80% of my work is portraiture. The live stuff I tend to shoot if it's a commission, or if I have. I always make sure I have a little bit more access than the standard 3 songs, you know, the 3 songs, then you're out rule. So especially when you're working with guys like Rival Sons, to make the most of their live show, you need to examine. I have a little look on set lists. You can find out if I was going to shoot a band like Sons, for instance. If I was going to shoot them in the middle of a UK tour, I would look at the fan groups and see what set list they've been doing, you know, the previous kind of dates. Because quite often the set list is not every time, and I've been caught out by this, but quite often the set list will be the same, if not similar, so they can hone their live show around the UK, getting towards the London show. Normally the London show is pretty much the same as the night before. I normally have a little chimp at what other photographers have done, let's say in Newcastle or, Nottingham or what have you, because the lighting guy for the show will be doing, it'll be like the songs or a set list, there'll be lighting cues which will migrate as they go along. So if I know that the lead singer at some point at the beginning or an end of a particular song is going to pull a move, I'd make sure that I'm there and I've got the exposure ready for this split second thing, which will be probably, especially with the American bands, they normally, it's a show. So they'll do similar moves every time. And so it's just, again, it's homework and research. I mean, things that can go wrong, obviously, in that scenario are, I had it once where for some reason, my camera would not take a picture. It would focus, but it would not take a picture. And I found out later that I'd just got this touchscreen. It was a Canon 5D Mark IV, which had a touchscreen. And somehow, maybe my nose had touched the touchscreen or something in my kind of hurry, and I put it onto self-timer. So it was a 10-second timer. So every time I pressed the shutter, obviously it wasn't going to take a picture. So I just completely panicked and grabbed a second body. As it turned out, it was something. It was a user error. But yeah, I think it's always good to have spare stuff. It's difficult if you're starting out and you don't have two bodies. But yeah, just be prepared. Spare everything if you can. If you can't, it doesn't matter. Sometimes shit happens. I mean, on some of the cameras, touch wood, I haven't had a card go down on me, but then I'm always shooting. I normally shoot to both on mine because I'm lucky. I'm in the position that my camera has two slots. But yeah, what are the things that could go wrong? User and hardware. But you just roll with it. I was going to say, if in doubt, I had a complete camera malfunction once. It was a day off, actually, and I'd gone off to see mate put a gig on, and it was October Drift, a new indie band, and they're absolutely awesome. My camera didn't work for some reason, so I sketched them. It's rubbish, but it's you just got to do what you can.
I mean, looking at the job of being a music photographer or a musician's photographer, however it's described. Like I don't believe there's such a thing as a wedding photographer, because you are like a multiple of different types of photography over the course of a day. And I feel like with music, you are a portrait photographer sometimes you're kind of like a candid photographer, almost like a street photographer. You can be all sorts of things. But with being a music photographer, one thing, and this is just the most crap question, but I do apologize, I have to ask it as someone that's very jealous of the job that you do. What's it like photographing music or musicians that you're just not a fan of?
That's never happened. What are you talking about? No, I mean, the thing is, I am pretty, my music tastes are they're quite eclectic. I mean, I used to play kind of grungy kind of, Pixies type music in the 90s. And I'm a big fan of alternative rock, but a lot of the bands that I shoot, I think just down to the kind of maybe the graphic style that I've got, it's a lot of classic rock bands, that I work with, Blackberry Smoke, The Sons, that sort of people. I mean, and I've kind of, you're not always going to like all the music all the time. Even a band that I really like, you're not going to like all the songs by that band, So yeah. It all comes back, I think, to the process. And the idea of a musician, to me, isn't necessarily about the music they make, but it's about that process. It's about, if I put a couple of guitars, a bass and a drum kit into a room and I chuck 4 Liverpudlians in there in 1964, you get the Beatles. But if I throw 4 teenagers in 1976 into the same room with the same instruments, you get the Sex Pistols. So what I'm in love with is capturing that process. And I do that hopefully through through these portraits and through the live shots. I mean, it's interesting that I think it sounds wanky. As someone said this, there's I can't remember who it was that said this. I saw this great picture of Tom Petty, and underneath it's on Instagram. I can't remember whose it was, but it was fantastic. And it was the hashtag. It was live portrait, and I don't know if that's a thing, because obviously with the portrait, you're kind of, unless it's a candid portrait, you're contriving almost every aspect. You know, the light, the pose, the look, you know, everything. Down to the cat's light in the eyes, you know. But so on stage, you have no control. Normally, you have no control over, you know, who's going to stand where. You know, you get a lead singer if he'd literally been standing 2 centimeters to the left, the shot would not be there, you know. And so you have to roll with the punches.
Well, I mean, to that point, I mean, I recently was informed by someone who had requested to come on the podcast that he was a car portrait photographer. So I'm now at the point where I think the word portrait might have lost all of its meaning. You mentioned your style there, and obviously you're someone that really, really massively heavily favors black and white imagery. Is that from an influence, or is that just a general aesthetic that you like in life? What's the meaning behind black and white?
Oh my God. Yeah. So I've sat in a pub with a guy called Jamie Wagg. He used to be like head of art at a big art school. And we talk about whether photography is art or not. And he drew my attention to a really famous, who was it? Who was the fuck? There's a really famous painting by Magritte, maybe. And it's a picture of a pipe. And on top of it says the words, "This is not a pipe." Basically, it's a picture of a pipe, so therefore it's not a pipe. So, and Jamie argues that black and white photography is art. And color photography is basically a facsimile of life. Now, whether that's true or not, and whether you're going to use this in your podcast because it sounds a bit weird, I don't know. But I think there's a timelessness about black and white, and it kind of documents people. There's a continuity to black and white that means that you can see an array of pictures from the 1920s to the 2020s in black and white, and it ties it all together nicely. Also, I think the tones and the contrast in black and white. Even when I'm shooting, normally, if I'm shooting a live show, obviously, the publishers, they'll want color pictures, but quite often I'll be monitoring on the screen. That will always turn to monochrome all the time. Whether I'm doing portraits, color portraits, or color street or color live, I'll always have the back turned to mono because I can see it's almost I can see the dynamic contrast, the light and shade better. And for me, black and white could be punchier.
Yeah.
Color's great. I think I'm just not good at color. I think maybe I'm just crap at color. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I just prefer it.
Well, when I shoot weddings, I shoot with my camera set to black and white for the exact reason that, I've found myself when the white balance, especially when you're in kind of a rush, if the white balance is cooler than what I'm actually seeing, I tend to think that the scene needs to be brightened up. And if it's too warm, I tend to think that the exposure's out, it needs to be brought down. And that's just the psychology of color on a very low IQ mind. And I feel like that's the best way for me to kind of circumnavigate my own stupidity is to shoot in black and white. I also just feel like I enjoy the process of photographing in black and white a lot more because it feels, I don't even have a non-pompous way of saying it, but it just feels more like a photograph when it's in black and white. I don't know what the word is, but it definitely feels more like it's just supposed to be representative of what was there. And it's kind of just like, here's a thing that was there. Whereas in black and white, you're showing people something in a way that they can't see it without seeing it through the lens of a camera.
Yeah.
I get absolutely bollocked constantly by a few people because I don't talk about gear on a photography podcast because I actually don't feel like it's particularly important. But if you don't mind, I do want to just ask you an incredibly boring question about the gear that goes into doing what you do.
Yeah.
I'm assuming can you be a prime shooter and shoot live music? What's in your camera bag for like your average assignment?
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, sometimes I'm incredibly lazy. Sometimes I've got. Do you want to know makes?
If you like.
Okay. Well, I shoot Canons, and I've got 5D Mark IVs. But I am a prime shooter, and I think I'm in love. 50 millimeters is great for me. I'm going for a bit of an 85 phase at the moment, but I quite often. I mean, I think the first time I shot Rival Sons, I just had a 35 in a bag, and it was just a prime, and I stood there and got in. Just get in there. I think you can make something work with anything. I mean, I'm not a big fan of jumping on the tube with 2 tons of gear, because also in the pit. I mean, I think 99% of the people in the pit shooting music will have, the super zooms. They'll do the 24-70 and the 70-200, all night long. And I don't know. I prefer I prefer how primes make me work. I mean, if I'm shooting in a really big venue with a 35, you've got to really work hard. Mm-hmm. Because you've got to move. You've got to get yourself from A to B. You can't just stand in the middle and point your camera at the front man and wait for him to do a thing. I remember I shot Kenny Wayne Shepherd at the Shepherd's Bush Empire. This was an important night for me because something happened, and I had a 50, I had an 85, I had 24 in my bag. And obviously shooting primes at a gig is just mental because, you're changing primes in the dark. But anyway, there were 31 people in the pit, all there for the first 3 songs only. And Kenny Wayne comes out and he does the thing, foot on the monitor, and there's 31 people right in front of Kenny Wayne Shepherd, all with exactly the same 24-70. 70-200, and it looked like this multi-lensed headed beast. And so I just got myself to one side, towards one of the speaker stacks, and took a picture of that. And that was one of my favorite pictures. It was this weird press beast versus this blue-eyed, long-haired guitar player, and I don't know. Yeah, that was all right. But gear-wise, it all depends. For a live shoot, if it's a commission, I'll be 24. I just got a really weird, uncorrected 15 for almost no money. It was like 300 quid, and it's really horrible. And it makes you have to make sure you're in exactly the right place. Otherwise, the distortion is vile. It's either it's completely vile, but if you get it just right, you can get some real epic wides. But your protagonist has to be dead center, and there's a certain distance they have to be away. And it took me a while. I hated that lens for a long time, and ironically, just before lockdown, I just found out how to use it properly. And that could do so. Yeah, so live gig 15, 24, 35, 50, 85, all in one of those kind of carry-on roller bags. But if I'm feeling lazy, it will just be a 50.
I'm going to ask a question that I feel like you've probably had a million conversations about this. Having been to just about every musician I've ever wanted to see play live, I've been to multiple times. I'm a huge fan of live music. Fuck 2020 for that particular reason. Phones, something that drive you completely mad? Is it a conversation you're sick of having? Because obviously live music seems to have been, and to a weird extent, for some reason, fireworks seem to be built for people with phones to stand there and stare at the screen on their phone rather than look at the thing that they've paid a significant amount of money to go and watch. How do you feel about the amount of people that bring phones out during sort of, live music?
I don't give a fuck because they're behind me.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it is interesting. I think it's kind of, like you say, you can spend 50 quid to go and watch something through your phone that you could have just stayed at home and watched through a other device. It seems bonkers to me, absolutely. But in a way, it's kind of, I think, it's like this future historian kind of thing. You'll see there'll be so much more history, live. Just imagine all the footage that you'd go through on YouTube if Zeppelin's some of Zeppelin's shows were filmed on phones. Is there's a weird kind of social history element to it. I think it's a pain in the arse. If I was on stage, I wouldn't like it. I don't think. And I think as a musician and as an artist, you always want to control as much as possible the quality of the footage and images of your likeness. I mean, it must bug. I mean, it's for instance, I think coming back to Zeppelin. I mean, have you ever seen the footage of Led Zeppelin playing with Phil Collins on drums at Live Aid?
No.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, that's because there's a team of people every time it gets put up there. I mean, people have got the whole of Live Aid on video, but if you upload that to YouTube, it will get taken down because I think you can see the entire Live Aid concert, on YouTube, but you can't see that because obviously, I don't know if there are chemicals involved and the performance wasn't particularly great. I guarantee you there's somebody's job is to keep an eye on YouTube to keep taking that down. And that's what I think musicians now, that, there's no way of policing the quality of posts. You can be the best guitar player, best singer in the world, but someone's got, an iPhone 4 and they're streaming it live on Facebook. You can't stop it, but it doesn't particularly affect me directly.
Something I've noticed at gigs previously, and you alluded to it earlier, was this 3-song limit. It's quite a common thing where like a herd of photographers come out, do 3 songs and then go. And it's something that I've always looked at from the point of view of like not knowing the first thing about how to photograph a live gig in any way that would be remotely decent. But that 3-song limit, it always feels like it's the 3 songs you really wouldn't want to be photographing, because like the first one can have lots of energy, but they're still warming up. They're not fully into it. They haven't explored the space. The second one tends to start to sort of wind down. And the third song tends to be the one where they've kind of now got their space set out and they're just kind of warming up at that point. And it's almost like if you were on a 3-song limit, you're actually leaving at the point that things are just starting to get going.
Yes, that's true. But also in terms of what these photographs are for, where they're going, it's coming back to the control of your image. So I mean, if let's say you're doing like a gig at a big place, it's that the lights are hot, super hot. You come on stage, maybe you're right about the first song. I think if you're a professional, if you're a really good band, you hit the road, you hit the ground running. But what happens over the course of 3 songs is you get hot and sweaty. You get sweat patches under your arms. Your hair starts getting wet. And I think in terms of these photographs will go to, the papers, for gig reviews, online reviews. I mean, you could argue there are too many pictures, but I think the first 3 is good because I'm always very aware when I'm shooting a band, whether it be in a big space or a small space, that you are in between the musician and the audience. And I think it's good that, the big herd of photographers are told to fuck off after 3, because that means there's no barrier between the band and the audience. Because as a photographer, especially if I'm getting paid to shoot a band, I never ever forget that feeling of spending my own money on gig tickets. And you're going to see a band, you're not going to see a bunch of photographers in front of a band. So I think in that respect, it is good. But where the real art is to try and capture the spirit of the show in those first 3 songs. And that's when, doing things like checking the set list, looking at previous shots, you can actually capture people pretty well, because they will come out, hey London, get that moment, that only happens once. So, I mean, there are opportunities, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the gig itself it's only just starting to happen. It's the little hello to the audience, but I think you can get the goods in 3 songs, and also get the photographers out, because they're basically, they're unnecessary, and I might if I'm shooting the whole show, I'll I'll be subtle and I'll duck and I'll creep around in the wings and try and get a few little other moments that you don't get in the first three. But yeah, always respect the audience having paid
to look at their phones. So.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
This one's a bit of a weird one. So I think a few years ago, there was a bit of a furore over Taylor Swift putting out a contract for all of the people that would be photographing her.
Yeah.
There's been other instances. I think Gary Barlow. I'm not really sure who's photographing Gary Barlow, but people wanting to photograph Gary Barlow. He had some claim over every picture that was taken of him, or you weren't allowed in to photograph him. How is that all playing out? Is that something you see increasing, or is that just like kind of weird anomalies?
Yeah, I mean, it's just intellectual property, isn't it? And it's not that it's, you have it with, big stars like that. But you also get it with, magazine when you're a contributor. I mean, I remember years ago I was working with the NME and a new contract came out, and the new contract meant that you got paid a little bit more, but the company that owns the magazine owns the intellectual rights to everything, and you basically, it's a buyout, and I think they're morally wrong. And I think photographs are, the artist will exploit the images if they're good to enhance their own career via, online articles and magazines and that sort of thing. And I think I wouldn't sign anything like that. I wouldn't sign anything like that, even if it was a Beatle. I would just say no, because that's, I could get more money than I've got now by signing buyouts. Let's say if someone wants some photographs of person artist A, they'll say, "Can you do it?" And I'll say, "What's your budget?" And then they'll say X, but we want a buyout, which is essentially the same as that Gary Barlow contract. So I'll say no. And then we go from there. But I think morally, I think they're morally wrong. Obviously, legally they are a thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do it. I think a lot of the major festivals. I think last time I was shooting at Reading Festival, when you go to the press area, they tried to get me to. I think everyone had to sign one there, but I didn't. But it's. But you just got to do what you got to do. I mean, I'm not a believer of signing away intellectual rights because this is the only thing I have is taking photographs of people, making photographs of people. So I'm not going to sign it away, even if it was Paul McCartney, I wouldn't do it.
Well, festivals are an interesting point for me because I did Reading Festival back in, I think, 2007 and had a miserable time of two drugged out people tried to have sex on my leg while Arcade Fire were destroying my brain, having all kinds of technical issues. And then Red Hot Chili Peppers came on. They had all kinds of technical issues. But I find festivals to be really bizarre because I don't know if I'm not getting it, but I don't massively enjoy seeing musicians outdoors during the day. That side of it I find really hard to get into. Are they harder for you to photograph compared to like that cool atmosphere and the contrast of shooting a night gig or an indoor gig?
Oh, totally. It's the worst thing, especially exposures are a nightmare, because especially sometimes there's a new trendy type of stage, which has the sky in the background, and you kind of, it just looks, it's literally like someone's taken a Hoover and hoovered all the vibe out of the space. It's just nice. It's really tricky. I mean, you've got to decide whether you're going to, which bits of the photograph you're going to blow. Highlights by, what I find it incredibly challenging, and it's like having a bath with your socks on. It's just, it could be anyone, it could be any rock star. It's just, Led Zeppelin get back together and they're doing it outside in a day. Fuck no, I'll stay in.
Yeah. I never really got, as a fan, I never felt myself get into it. I never felt myself kind of commit mentally to what I was seeing. And it kind of wore off on me quite quickly. Going back to the contract thing really quickly, and you mentioned about sort of musicians using images to further themselves. when they like them and so on. Do you feel like these contracts and perhaps the way that some people treat the work of photographers is kind of indicative of you not being appreciated for the difficulty and the skill of what you do?
Okay, yeah. Well, there's essentially, I think what's happened in especially the last kind of, let's say, 5 years is that, I mean, we're not photographers anymore. We're not. I mean, we'd like to think we are, but essentially we're content providers. When people want to put out an announcement or a little gig thing, we're content providers, and people, I think, especially as there are so many of us now, who are doing it for free or for 50 quid, or, I think what happens is the art form is less valued. Yes, absolutely. And therefore, and it's interesting because you've got so many more people doing it, which means there's a lot more mediocrity. And also, as the stuff isn't valued, I'm seeing more and more and more kind of weak photography used. Yes, we are undervalued. It's in the same way as musicians, I mean, with Spotify, it's like Spotify, isn't it? When you kind of, I know people have, my friend Charlotte just hit like 4 million plays. So she'll be able to pay the rent for 1 month,
Wow.
So, it's ridiculous. But I mean, it's like with photographs. There's so many photographers that, that Band-Aid could go to you, Kris, and say, hey, how much do you want for that? We want to use it for a poster. And you'll go, I want 450 quid. And they'll go, all right, we'll go with this other guy who's going to do it for free, and which will be worse, a worse photograph, inferior, but they'll just go for it because, essentially people don't read papers anymore, and they don't really, the days of kind of going out and buying the NME or the Melody Maker or what, that's just aged me. But even Q, people don't have time. They'll just be scrolling down news feeds. It's just noise, and we are literally just content providers, which is one of the reasons why I do more portrait than live, because I think for the amount of work you have to do compared to the amount of financial and mental reward you get, I'm just not that guy.
I mean, I'm looking through your website as we're talking and continuously just stopping on Rival Sons images because I kind of realizing that at 32 years old, I need to sort myself out. I'm a bit of a fanboy. Is there any particular image that, if you could carry one image forward from what you've taken so far, would be the one that you take with you? If you had to strike off all the other images that you've taken, which I know is a horrible thing to ask in general, because I would hate that question myself, but is there one image that you hold like dearest as the image that defines you as a photographer, anything like that?
What? Am I burning all the other ones?
Well, they're disappearing into the ether.
Okay, well, I'm going to be controversial, and I'm going to say there was a moment. I did a little press job for a company called Earache, and they had just signed to the UK a guy called the White Buffalo, who did a load of the music to Sons of Anarchy. Mm-hmm. A huge guy. Just massively charismatic. He's really scary, basically, and he's got this deep voice and his music. I made the mistake. I tend not to Google people too much before shoots. But yeah, I Googled this and there's some great images of him. Anyway, I turned up and he wasn't ready to have his photo taken.
Right.
Really. But we had a great shoot in the end. And it was the first time I really started going down a low key kind of approach, high contrast, black and white, low key, one light source. And it was born out of necessity. And I had the A&R guy for the record company. I laid a mirror on this table in this hotel in London, and he kind of just struck this little kind of stroking his chin type pose. And I just got the A&R man to hold up a black tablecloth that I bought from Debenhams behind him. And there was this natural light coming through the window. And I just thought, that's the one. Well, that's the first time I think I nailed I nailed the tone of matching somebody's character, someone's musical character, somebody's human character into an image. And I think that, because he's not as famous as the others, but for me personally, it was the first time it clicked that what I should be doing is creating an image based on their character, not on my style. So it was the matching of the two. And that was the first time it clicked. And in fact, I think that photograph was what, I'm pretty sure that exact frame was the reason I got the Slash gig.
Right.
I don't know for sure. But yeah, that's my answer. But that's the photo I take. Even though he looks amazing, but not a lot of people go, hey, it's White Buffalo. It was the first time I think I nailed it.
Well, it's interesting, right? The what some people would expect, especially if you're around in an age of celebrity culture where everyone's sort of clawing their way to try and get 15 minutes of fame. It's always interesting that, I think a lot of people would just be like, well, which one brought me the most likes, or which one brought me the most followers, or something like that. The sign of a in my opinion, the sign of a proper artist is someone that goes with the one that helped them vocalize or, show what they wanted to do more than anything else. It was more of their voice than anything else that they've done. I'm going to ask you the most irritating question as our last question. I'm so sorry, but I have to ask this.
Okay.
You've obviously photographed just a whole gamut of amazing musicians and artists. Is there anyone that's not currently in your portfolio that you want them to be, or that you just haven't had the opportunity to yet, but you're we'll try and speak it into existence now on the podcast?
I would love to shoot Iggy Pop.
Mm-hmm.
I think he consistently grows. He just did that Gucci campaign, didn't he? And he's like just in his pants in a limo. And I just think he seems like the sort of person that would be really up for anything. And there's something in his eyes and something in his, I would love to do Iggy. Totally.
I get the impression with Iggy Pop that you would be trying, you'd be like, okay, we've got to go now because, you're about to be on stage, thanks for the time. And he'd be like, no, I've got more ideas. How about if I just hang from the ceiling and I do this? And you would almost be the one that's like, wow, this guy's like almost too into it. He seems like that kind of performer. Yeah,
totally. I mean, that's it. It's an energy. Some people have this energy, and he looks like, I don't know what he's on, if he's on anything anymore. I don't know. I would love to do it. And already, just straight away, I'll just get him in a white suit and, just with a bottle of champagne, it would be great. It would be brilliant. I'd shoot him like he was Rod Stewart in 1978, and it would be great. But I think he would shoot it. I think it would be like shooting fish in a barrel with him. I think he's just such an iconic looking dude. But yeah, and the other person would be Tom York. Absolutely. But that's the one I would be the most scared about, because he's kind of, I think he's probably my favorite. I've shot him live, but I'd love to do a portrait of him.
Very, very other end of the scale in terms of personality from Iggy.
Oh, absolutely. And that one, I know exactly what I do as well, but I'm not saying, but it's good. There's elements of Rob Sheridan, and it would be colour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, baby.
Break out the colour for that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of scared, I got to be honest, I was kind of terrified about doing this because not coming from a position of having too much knowledge of how you do what you do, I didn't want to make a twat of myself or waste too much of your time with stupid questions. I think I have probably wasted your time with stupid questions, but you've been remarkably nice and such a great guy to talk to. The whole point of the podcast, the only reason I do it, the only reason that I continue to pester people like yourself who actually do amazing work into listening to my irritating voice is so that I can push your work onto as many people as possible, because it's fantastic and more people should enjoy it. Where's the best places for people to go to find what it is that you do?
Well, I'm a big fan of Instagram at the moment. And that's, if you want to see my Instagram, it's at Blackham Images, all one word. If you want to see my website, it's blackhamimages.com. Yeah, they're the best. Or come round my house. I've got plenty up.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. It's been groovy. And I look forward to seeing your gig pictures.